Really quick, everybody, this entire video will be timestamped, so if you don't want to watch whole thing and just get straight into a different fight, please check the pinned comment or the chapters bar right down below you. Again, this entire video will be timestamped, and I'd appreciate you guys watching whatever part that you like. If you're sticking around, guys, hello, everybody, and welcome back to another video. If you are new here, my name is Kyle. I'm your guy with too many YouTube channels, and welcome back to our full card breakdown and prediction for this time, UFC on ABC 5. Emmett versus Topuria. I'm excited for this one. This card is stacked, guys. I cannot wait for this. So please, hear my predictions. I would love to know what you guys think down below afterwards. Again, timestamps are there if you would like to use them. Starting off with the first fight, Tatsuro Taira versus Kleydson Rodrigues. Guys, this might be the fight that I am at least one of the most excited that I've been to see this fight on the entire card, okay? You have two guys that are so promising, and no matter what happens in this fight, I truthfully believe that both of these guys will be contenders in the flyweight division one day. They are very promising. Their skill sets are fantastic so far, but something I do want to note before we get into how these two might match up is Rodrigues. He came into the UFC, got a nice win over the Contender Series, right? But came into the UFC and has a loss against CJ Vergara. This fight, truthfully, could have went either way. I believe he still lost that fight, but it was incredibly close. Incredibly close. So the way, if you want to look at it, you could look at it as both these guys are on an absolute roll. Of course, Taira being undefeated, but Kleydson Rodrigues having two losses, arguably one loss. That's something to note, to be honest with you. And something to note while we're talking about the record is CJ Vergara is a recent common opponent. Kleydson Rodrigues struggled with him. And 2 fights ago, Taira fought the same, and he got a really, really nice submission very quick into the fight. So you could say, like, hey, you know what? He came in, just completely dismantled CJ Vergara in the way Rodrigues wasn't able to do. However, that is MMA math. Make of that what you will. It doesn't always add up, right? But where Taira will have the advantage here, because both these guys have very, very nice striking youth, and there's a little bit of a reach advantage, but nothing that's really standing out here. They're pretty much the same size. The only thing that stands out in this fight is Taira's jiu-jitsu game. Obviously, Taira's jiu-jitsu game will be much better than Kleydson Rodrigues, but that's not to say that Rodrigues doesn't have jiu-jitsu. Both these guys are good everywhere, but Taira's jiu-jitsu does stand out when you're having these two match up here. And that's why I'm going to pick Taira to win. I believe he has more options to win the fight. The submission threat is always going to be there if the fight does hit the mat, which it's tough to say whether it will. I think we need to see a little bit more from these guys. But if the fight does go to the ground, the submission threat will absolutely be there. This dude has been shown to really, really be quick at snatching things up. But I do believe at minus 375, that is just incorrect. That should not be. He should not be that much a favorite. Rodrigues is a live underdog in this. And I'm not saying like to go bet on the underdog, right? I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying this fight is a lot closer than people are making it out to be. I'm like 70-30 on the side of Taira. I'm going to pick him to win this fight, but this is very interesting, guys. Do not miss the first fight on this card. It's going to be fantastic. Moving on to the next fight, and this one's really interesting, guys. We have Jamall Emmers versus Jenkins, there. Jamall Emmers coming off of a really, really nice win against a fight that everybody was counting him out of, to be honest with you, in Radzhabov. Look at 23-0. There you go. Like, taking on, everybody was counting him out in this fight. He came in, just looked great. He had a really, really nice performance, but of course, before that in the 19-6, he's had a little bit of a spotty record. However, one, he's very inactive, incredibly inactive. You can see his last loss to Giga Chikadze was 3 years and 3 months ago. Giga did then go on to become quite the contender, and this was a split decision loss. Next loss, Pat Sabatini. Look what Pat Sabatini just did. People are starting to realize the hype that Pat Sabatini is. He's been looking real, real good. So these losses aren't too bad to have, but I don't like the inactivity. I don't like it, but he came back 3 months ago and looked great. So who am I to really criticize that? Jenkins has looked great since he came into the UFC. I believe it's been 2 fights. Yes, 2 fights, and the only problem is that he hasn't faced anybody to the likes of Jamall Emmers yet. I believe that Jenkins does have a lot of potential. A lot. I'm just not sold on him yet. I like that Jamall Emmers has been very consistent in his career where he's been taking on very, very tough guys, and he's been performing well in most fights, even though when he does lose. I believe Jamall Emmers will be the safer pick here, and that's why I'm going to pick him, because both these guys, it's tough, because Jenkins is a very nice all-round fighter, while Jamall Emmers will want this fight standing, but Jenkins has been shown where he can fight anywhere. So if he wants to take him down, I don't believe, like, Jamall Emmers has fantastic takedown defense. I don't think this fight's going to go to the ground at all, because Emmers is going to want to stay at the feet, and I believe he'll have the defense to keep it on the feet. Now you have the question is what happens when these two actually line up and start throwing punches. I don't mind Emmers' chances in this one, but Jack Jenkins, I'm still a little bit unsure about where he fits in the division. I'll be looking at him a lot more closely if he does take out Jamall Emmers, but for now, I am going to pick Emmers. He does have a very nice reach advantage, and I believe this fight will stay on the feet. While their skill sets are a little bit similar in my opinion, I believe Emmers will take it out, and he could use that reach advantage to really stump Jack Jenkins in his tracks there. Moving on to the next fight, we have the return of Trevor Peek. He's taking on a short notice opponent in Chepe Mariscal. So, Trevor Peek, I'm a big fan of Trevor Peek. He really won me over in his last fight. He seems so grateful to be here, and his fights are always so exciting. So, long story short, I hope Trevor Peek wins this fight, but I'm not one to pick with my heart, okay? So, Trevor Peek, coming off, like I said, he's looked great so far. Looked great in the UFC. He's been getting these nice knockout wins. However, if you watch Trevor Peek fight, you would know that it is some of the sloppiest striking that you will see in the UFC. While effective so far, this dude, I'm not confident at all that he will make it up, especially in a division like lightweight. I don't believe he's going to get anywhere near the top 15. Unless, of course, there's always opportunity for growth, right? He's 28 years old, just about to enter his prime. There's a lot of room for growth, but as of right now, I'm not confident at all that he's going to really be much into the UFC. However, I really like him. And I hope to see him win. He's taking on a brand new opponent in Chepe Mariscal here. Now, I will say a lot of times when I make these videos too, especially, and I'm just a fight fan in general, I like to go back and I watch some of these guys' performances. I watch their highlights. I like to look up around them, but since it's a short notice opponent, I've only seen the one fight in LFA where he looked very good. But before that, he's coming in off a couple wins, and this is his only fight in the LFA. He's already getting into the UFC now. So there's a little bit of a question mark for me, at least. I don't know if you guys have really watched anything on him. There's a question mark for me on just how good he is and how ready he is. So it's tough for me to break down this fight. However, I will say, because this is short notice and Trevor Peek has been on a nice knockout streak, this guy's going to come out in the first round and really try to take your head off. There's always the potential for him to get caught. But this, like I said, short notice fight. Mariscal's coming in for the first fight in the UFC. I got to go Trevor Peek. How can I not? And I'm honestly, I'm feeling it. I'm really feeling it. But if he takes out Trevor Peek, then this is something to really take a look at. But for your first UFC fight, you're coming in at 13-6. I'm not liking it, and Trevor Peek does have heavy hands. Maybe we'll see some more standing hammer fists. I'm excited for this fight. I gotta go for Trevor Peek to win this fight. Moving on to the next fight, and guys, I think we got a coin flip fight here. We have Tabatha Ricci versus Gillian Robertson. I'm not typically too excited for WMA fights, but I'm actually quite interested in how this one's going to go. Tabatha Ricci, we all know, very promising prospect in the division. Came into the UFC with a little bit of a rough go, and after that, since then, looking great. Looking fantastic. And her wins aren't against nobody's at all. Besides, maybe Maria Oliveira is not that good. But you know what? She's been looking great. Looking fantastic. And this is, take a look at these two, too. You know what I mean? The reach is pretty much the same. The age is the same. The weight, Gillian Robertson might, depending, I don't know how these guys will match up or when they really get into, the face-offs and stuff. But I would imagine the Gillian Robertson will be just a tad bigger. Just a guess, so don't say that. But anyways, Gillian Robertson, 12-7 record. When I was looking at this fight against JJ Aldrich, I was talking about Gillian Robertson, where it's you know what? Just one of those fighters in the division. You know what I mean? I wasn't high on her at all. However, she came in, and she has looked absolutely fantastic in these two fights that she had. Granted, they aren't the same caliber of opponents that Ricci has fought, but it was enough where I was looking at this fight, and I was like, wow. And then the second time it happened, where I was like, okay, that wasn't just a one-off performance. And you've been hearing how much work she's been putting into her jiu-jitsu. I don't mind Gillian Robertson's chances in this fight at all. I'm kind of on board with the train, and the problem is, we've seen her be so inconsistent, right? She's 12-7. But these last two performances, they've been looking really good. Tabatha Ricci, though, is an opponent that's a little bit of a rough spot. When these two stand up and strike, I believe Ricci will have a little bit of an advantage, while it's just a little bit. When it hits the ground, I have no clue what's going to happen. If you want to think about this logically, maybe Tabatha Ricci will have the upper hand because we know her credentials in jiu-jitsu, but Gillian Robertson has just looked so good, and I like the momentum. I think I want to pick her. Of course, anything can happen in this division, WMA, but my gut's telling me Robertson on this one. I want to bet on it, but I've been bitten in the butt way too many times with this division in betting on this fight. But usually with women's fights, I go 1.5 rounds to go over. But this one, not even close. Like these two could find a submission. Either that, or they just have these beautiful scrambles where nothing really happens. And we just go, oh, just a second. I'm actually quite interested in this fight. I'm going to pick Robertson. I'm in the hype now. And that might bite me in the butt, but that's my pick. Moving on to the next fight, guys. I'm not so sure about this fight. We have two amazing, and while they're in their 30s, they are kind of prospects. People, like fighters that people are really, really hyped on. We have Mateusz Rebecki versus Loik Radzhabov. Now, this fight's going to be exciting. You have Loik, who's a little bit more on the well-rounded side. Mateusz kind of, I don't want to say he's not well-rounded, but he has like that, I'm going to throw a big shot and shoot for a takedown kind of a style. You know what I mean? He is capable of having a nice stand-up war, but his strength is pressure, take you down, beat you up. I got a feeling he might actually do that, but what's bothering me is Loik does have really nice takedown defense from what we've seen. Both guys coming off, and Rebecki obviously has the better resume, right? Coming in off the Dana White's Contender Series, just absolutely annihilated the guy, but then came in and looked great. Again, just 6 months ago, Loik is on a very nice 2-fight win streak himself. This fight in particular, the only thing that makes me worry is his fight against Esteban. While he did look good, it made me question his cardio just a little bit, and you need the cardio to fight Rebecki. This dude's pressure is like you've seen it from all the guys that would have that style. You need to keep up the takedown defense on this. But if Loik is able to defend these takedowns, I don't mind him in the striking department. He is a very good fighter in himself. A little bit of a coin flip fight for me on this one. I'm going like 55-45 on the side of Rebecki. He's just been more consistent. While Loik has that one loss, it's still nothing to hold over your head. 17-4, 17-1. The fighters are going to be very, very, very fun to watch. You guys cannot miss this fight. Great fights on this card, man. But if you made me pick, I'm going with Rebecki. Moving on to the next fight, we have Randy Brown versus Wellington Turman. Now, this is a little bit of an interesting fight because I have been paying attention to Wellington Turman because he has been training with Glover Teixeira, who is probably my favorite MMA fighter of all time, and Alex Pereira, who I really like. To have those two guys training with you, Glover coaching now, you have Glover's ground game and Alex Pereira's striking. I'm waiting for Wellington to show up just like a changed guy completely. However, we haven't seen it yet. Coming off of a rough loss against Andre Petroski, and he's been a little bit inconsistent his whole career, as you can see. Randy Brown, though. Randy Brown has looked very, very good in his recent history. He's fairly active, and now he's coming off that horrible loss against Jack Della Maddalena. However, I think that is absolutely nothing to hang your head over, and I think most of you would agree with me on that. Jack Della Maddalena is just one of those guys that seems like he is going to tear through the division until somebody stops him. Randy Brown wasn't going to be that guy. Randy Brown, outside of the top 15, probably destroys most people, in my opinion. Something to note here. 78 inches of reach, versus 72. There is a very nice reach advantage Randy Brown has, and Randy Brown uses his reach beautifully. I feel like in this fight, Randy Brown is just going to box his head off. Even though Wellington Turman, like I said, I'm waiting for the improvement to come. We haven't seen it yet. Wellington Turman, if you take a look, he's 18-6, coming off of a loss against Andre Petroski, like I said, but his 2 wins against Misha Serkinov and Sam Alvey. How much do you really want to like weigh that into your option here? He had a split decision against Sam Alvey, and that was just 2 years ago. Before that, and while he is losing to some decent fighters in Bruno Silva and Andrew Sanchez, I can't pick him to win this fight. Nothing that he's done has really impressed me. However, like I said, I'm waiting for him to grow. There's a lot of room to grow. He's only 26 years old right now. Randy Brown, we kind of know what we're going to get. I feel like Randy Brown's going to use his reach this whole time and just pick him apart. I got Randy Brown to win this fight. Moving on to the next fight, Justin Tafa versus the debut of Austen Lane. Now, Justin Tafa, I've been very interested in, okay? And long story short, I think I'm going to pick him in this fight with the asterisk on it that it's heavyweight and anything can happen, right? One of those guys, you land a shot, you can go down. It's MMA, and especially at heavyweight. Justin Tafa I've been a little bit confused by, okay? Because when we watched him have these 2 losses here, he's been in the UFC for a little bit now, I was like, maybe he isn't all that, you know what I mean? But then he came back a year ago, 3 months ago, looked great. The only problem is, how much do you really want to hold these wins as like, you know what, these are fantastic wins? He looked great, though. His striking, especially at heavyweight, is so powerful and so accurate. I'm kind of liking the momentum on him. Austen Lane, though, coming in to the UFC, got a nice win on Dana White's Contender Series, looked good. Very, very explosive, but when you're fighting a guy like Justin Tafa, I can see his explosiveness coming in and Justin Tafa just cracking him. I got a little bit of a gut feeling on this fight that Tafa's just going to catch him. And while we haven't seen Austen Lane fight these guys at the UFC caliber level, I don't think that he's going to get past Justin Tafa, man. It's one of those fights where I'm like, I just got a feeling. And I'm not saying like Lane, all he has is explosiveness. He's a decently well-rounded fighter. Very big, very strong. He's going to have a huge reach advantage. But Tafa's striking just seems like he's one of those, he just places his shots so nicely. And when you have a guy coming in and probably going to swarm on you, I feel like Tafa's going to catch him. Knock him out. Especially if you want to use that explosiveness as momentum, the shot's just going to be even harder. I got to go with Tafa on this one, man. Moving on to the next fight, we might finally get to see Zhalgas Zhumagulov fight. He's taking on Joshua Van, the brand new addition to the UFC roster. Now, Zhalgas, we've talked about him last week. We've talked about him before. This is one of those guys who has been getting a rough go with the judges. Very, very rough. Any one of these fights he looked good with, except obviously the one where he got KO'd in. He looked good in, but the problem is the judges just didn't go his way, and some people thought that he won every single one of his fights. So something to note is that do not judge his 14-8 record. Do not judge it at all. He's a very, very good fighter, very, very nice style, very pressure heavy. I like him a lot in this fight, especially as a UFC newcomer in Joshua Van coming in, looking good so far. But the problem is, very, very short notice fight. What's it got to be, like less than a week? Less than a week he's coming in. His first UFC fight, taking on a guy, Zhalgas Zhumagulov, who has taken on some very, very nice opponents in the flyweight division. The only problem is 34 years old, and this is something that I was talking about last week, okay? Zhalgas Zhumagulov, he said that he quote-unquote retired, right? He has been very outspoken, and this worries me. I don't understand why people aren't talking about it. He's been very outspoken of, like, these judges are idiots. I don't know why they're not giving me the wins that I deserve and stuff like that. When you start talking trash about the judges, in my opinion, and especially with how we've seen robberies come about, let's say this fight goes to a decision and Joshua Van outworked him. Or Zhalgas Zhumagulov outworked Joshua Van. I wouldn't put it past the judges to be like, screw this guy. Give the win to Joshua Van. So if this goes to a decision, this worries me. However, Joshua Van, what he has going for him is a very nice ground game, and that's what Zhalgas Zhumagulov will probably be looking to do. I would imagine that Zhalgas will have all the tools in the pocket to deal with anything that Joshua Van really has to offer him. This guy's coming into the UFC, brand new to the roster, 21 years old, taking on a guy with lots of experience. I got to go with Zhalgas. However, keep in mind if this fight goes to a decision, we could see another robbery on it. Like, I don't know why people aren't talking about that, but I got Zhalgas to win this fight. Moving on to the next fight, Neil Magny versus Philip Rowe. Now, Neil Magny, if you guys don't know, Neil Magny, I am a very big fan of. I've been watching Neil Magny forever. I love Neil Magny. I like him as a guy. Big fan of Neil Magny. So I hope he takes the win here, and I actually think he's going to. I really believe that. If you take a look at Neil Magny's 2 losses against Gilbert Burns, great fighter, and then Shavkat Rakhmonov, great fighter, and he lost in similar ways. So maybe there's a brand new path to beat Neil Magny that we don't know about, where it's just like you have a guy that has so much strength, smother him to the ground, get a quick submission in round 1. Other than that, Neil Magny, he's been a little bit inconsistent in his fights, but sometimes he'll look really good, and then sometimes he'll look really, really bad. It's weird, his career. He's a very good fighter. He can hang with anybody. He can beat anybody on some night, and I believe he can lose to anybody on a night. Philip Rowe, though, can come in, and in my opinion, while he's looked great so far, he's had some really nice KOs, especially in his last fight, Nico Price. Looked fantastic. I believe all he has to really offer Neil Magny in this fight is a little bit of a worry in this stand-up. And typically, Neil Magny can handle guys like Philip Rowe. Neil Magny, I feel like, would lose to the top 15 most of the time, but when you're taking on a guy like Rowe, I believe Magny will be able to edge him out. He might be able to use his wrestling. He will certainly be the more all-rounded fighter, the guy with more experience, a lot more experience with tougher guys. I like Neil Magny in this fight, and I think he can get back in the win column with this, and it makes sense if you want to go win-loss. He's due for a win. Of course, I'm just a little bit messing around there, but I like Neil Magny in this fight. I like the matchup. I feel like he'll be dictating where the fight goes, If he's having a little bit of problems on the feet, I believe he won't have a problem taking this fight to the ground. He's very, very nice, all-rounded, very good fighter. Only thing to note is 35 years old, but we haven't seen his age show just yet. I got Neil Magny in this one. I like him. Moving on to the next fight, we have Brendan Allen. I'm very interested to see this fight. I'm very interested to see the return of Brendan Allen. He's taking on a guy in Bruno Silva, who a lot of people were counting out in his last fight, but then got a nice knockout a month ago against Brad Tavares. Of course, people were counting him out since his loss to Alex Pereira, and he hasn't been getting too much attention till that fight. But then, of course, he had a little bit of a problem with GM3, one of those fighters that can beat anybody and lose to anybody, right? Came back, got a great win against Brad Tavares. Looked great in that fight. Brendan Allen, though. Brendan Allen has put together a very sneaky 4-fight win streak and has looked very good in them. This last fight in particular really sold me that Brendan Allen might be a contender to watch out for. And while he's been looking great, like, don't get me wrong, I wasn't like doubting him or anything, but I wasn't really paying too much attention to him, really thinking about like the future of Brendan Allen or anything like that. But he out-grappled and submitted Andre Muniz. That is an incredible feat. Incredible. He shocked the world with that performance here. And he's been fighting really good before that too. It's not like, oh my God, he actually got a win against Andre Muniz. Like this, a lot of people were picking Brendan Allen to win this fight. I wasn't. But very, very good fighter. And that's why I'm excited to see Allen return. I don't know, I don't know where his ceiling is, though. He might get past a guy like Bruno Silva. When you're looking at this matchup, I believe Brendan Allen should have success on the ground. Striking is going to have to be really, really careful because Bruno Silva is one of those guys that carries that power that can just end a fight at any moment in time. Any moment. So that's a problem when making a prediction because Bruno Silva is like one of those guys. He can just catch you. Look at his last fight. But Brendan Allen, I like his momentum, man. I like his momentum a lot. This fight, I would absolutely stay away from, betting. I'm kind of like 60-40 on the side of Allen. Not confident whatsoever that he's going to win this fight, but I like the momentum that he's been on. I feel like he will be able to get this fight to the ground, possibly find a submission, but Bruno Silva is a big, strong guy. So I don't know. I don't know how this fight's going to go. I'm going to side with Brendan Allen because I have to make a pick here, but I'm not sure at all. I'm not sure at all about this one. Moving on to the next fight, we have David Onama taking on Gabriel Santos. Now, something to note before we get into this fight is Gabriel Santos, a lot of people thought that he won this fight. His UFC debut against Lerone Murphy. Regardless of the decision, he looked fantastic. It was a great fight. I thought the fight could have gone either way, but a lot of people, you could argue that he is 11-0. You could argue that. Before that, looked fantastic in LFA. Looked absolutely amazing. I watched these fights. They were great. As you guys know, if you've been watching the channel at least, I love LFA. Very, very underrated organization. You get the privilege of seeing guys like Gabriel Santos before they enter the UFC. So if you don't watch LFA, go check it out. I have all the promotions that you can watch. LFA is one you should certainly take a look at, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about David Onama versus Gabriel Santos. David Onama coming off of a rough loss to Nate the Train. He was winning the fight until the pressure really, really got to him. But the pressure that Nate Landwehr puts on people is just a pressure that not a lot of people can put on people. You know what I mean? So while David Onama did fade in that fight, Nate Landwehr, how much you really want to look at that? You know what I mean? You can't go and say, hey, David Onama doesn't have a gas tank. It's just a different kind of pressure. But David Onama, both these guys are pretty well-rounded. It's tough to take a look at this fight and what happens when these skill sets actually match up. Gabriel Santos, though, has been very, very nice. A little bit more of a gut feeling on this fight. I could see Gabriel Santos clipping him and just catching him with a shot and winning the fight. I don't mind his chances of a knockout here. There's a lot of hype on this guy. We've seen David Onama now, a little bit inconsistent, but still a good fighter. Gabriel Santos, though, he looked fantastic in this performance despite it being a loss. And before that, he's looked great. I'm leaning towards Gabriel Santos on this fight. While it may be a competitive fight, I believe Gabriel Santos will kind of find his rhythm and outstrike David Onama. I have a hard time seeing this fight going to the ground, but I got Santos in this one. I really, really, really I'm high on this dude. Maybe he won't get robbed. Who knows? But again, I'm not so sure it was a robbery. Good fight. Good fight. I can't wait to watch this dude fight again. Moving on to the next fight, we have Cody Brunson taking on Rodrigues Dumas. Now, tough fight. Anything could happen in this fight. Cody Brunson coming on in short notice, taking on Dumas here. Problem is, if this was a full camp, I'd be all over Brunson in this fight. Because while Dumas did look great coming to the UFC, he looked really, really good. Looked like he could potentially be a contender. Well, there were some holes in his game, and that a hole got exposed in his last fight against Josh Fremd. While Josh Fremd isn't necessarily like the best ground specialist in the world, Dumas, we have seen a horrible hole in his game, that being the takedown defense and the grappling. You bring in a guy like Brundage, who is a great wrestler with option of the power on the feet, so he can dictate the fight, make him worry about a takedown. He should, when you're matching these two up, Brundage should run through him with the same kind of game plan. However, Cody Brundage, in his losses, even when he is winning, his gas tank is a little bit of an issue. Having him step up on less than a week's notice, I'm like, I don't know. What is he going to have? A couple minutes in him? He's already inconsistent, so what if he gets tired and Dumas clips him? We've seen him get KO'd. I have no idea what's going to happen in this fight. If you had a gun to my head, I'd pick Brundage. But all he needs is a gas tank, man. If he's like in shape, ready to take this fight, it's okay if he gas later on in the fight. Just put a beating on him at the beginning. But I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen. But I am going to pick Cody Brundage to win this fight. Moving on to the next fight, we have Amanda Ribas versus Maycee Barber. Now, this is actually a decent fight in the division. I like the women's fights that we put on this time. Now, Amanda Ribas, coming off of a win. Before this, I wasn't necessarily high on her. I was kind of thinking like, okay, she's okay. She has some good submissions, especially after the Marina Rodrigues fight. I was like, okay, yeah, no, she's nothing. Came back, got a very nice win. Had a little bit of a tough loss, but you could argue that she won this fight against Caitlin Chukagian, and she looked good in this fight. And if I'm not mistaken, was that outside of the weight class? Don't hold me to my word on that. Is something about that's ringing a bell. However, asterisks on that fight, okay? But then she looked absolutely fantastic against Viviana Araujo. Fantastic. I'm back a little bit on the Amanda Ribas train after this fight. So my whole overlook of her is been a little bit of a rocky road. I keep changing my mind on how I feel about Amanda Ribas. Maycee Barber, though, she has not been living up to the hype that she is. She's gotten a couple decisions, especially this last one. I thought this one was a complete robbery. I thought Andrea Lee won this fight. Before that, got okay wins, but against opponents that aren't nearly as good as the opponents that Amanda Ribas has fought. Especially if you want to talk about the Miranda Maverick one. People think she lost this fight as well. I'd have to watch it again, but I believe I also thought Maverick won this fight. The judges like Maycee Barber. She is incredibly promotable. I get it. Amanda Ribas is also incredibly promotable. So you want to make this fight go to decision? I don't know if you really have to worry about a robbery in this one because both girls are insanely promotable. Which one would you choose? I would actually argue that a Ribas is a little bit more promotable than Maycee Barber is. This is tough because Maycee Barber is just an okay fighter in my opinion. No matter where the fight goes, if you want to have a wrestling or striking match, you want to stand up in the clinch, she's just okay everywhere. Amanda Ribas has had nice momentum, been in there with better opponents, and has a significant strength in jiu-jitsu in my opinion. I gotta go with Ribas, but I'm not sure. This is one of those fights where it's women's MMA and anything could happen. My pick will be Amanda Ribas to win this fight, staying far away from it on the betting lines. But I will pick Ribas to win this fight. Moving on to the main event, Josh Emmett coming back. It hasn't been that long, has it? 4 months ago. Okay, it was 4 months ago. Okay, I thought it was a little bit sooner than that. No, regardless, Josh Emmett versus Ilia Topuria. Now, this fight, honestly, I don't have too much to say about it, guys. I feel like Ilia Topuria is going to continue to do what he wants. This dude has faced no adversity yet, and I don't think Josh Emmett will give it to him. However, Josh Emmett has the power where he can give Ilia Topuria the first adversity. We don't know what happens. What's going to happen if a guy like Josh Emmett clips Ilia Topuria? This dude has incredible power. That's always a possibility, but if that doesn't happen, I believe Ilia will be better everywhere. He's the guy that he out-grappled Bryce Mitchell, man. Outstruck him. This dude is dangerous. Okay? There's very few contenders where we look at these guys and they're scary good. I believe Ilia Topuria is scary good. Of course, like I said, he's been steamrolling his opponents. He's looked great in every single fight that he's had since he came into the UFC. Josh Emmett, if you want to talk about his record, okay, he lost to Yair Rodrigues. Well, he did clip Yair Rodrigues. You want to talk about Calvin Kattar? He lost that fight 100%. You want to talk about Dan Ige? He lost that fight 100%. You have to go all the way to 2 years ago to find fights that this dude won. He's a little bit inactive. Well, recently he's been more active, but still, he hasn't looked good in his fights. He has moments in his fights, but I think Ilia Topuria is just going to continue to do what he wants in this fight. The dude's good everywhere. Josh Emmett, who knows how much his heart's in the game anymore. He just lost the interim belt, and he's not going to get another title fight. Absolutely not. He's 38 years old, going on 39. We haven't seen him really slow down yet, but that day is coming. And Ilie Topuria hasn't even entered his prime yet. The dude is getting better every time we see him, and we don't even know if that's possible. Because he's scary, man. He's scary good. So powerful, so accurate, so slick. I'm high on this guy, and I got Ilie Topuria to win this fight over Josh Emmett. With that being said, guys, that is all my breakdowns and predictions for these fights. Thank you so much for watching. There will be a betting video either tomorrow or the next day that I will upload with all of my bets, the bets that I'm going to be placing. I'd love to talk about it with you guys, so please, as of right now, let me know what your predictions are down below, what you think about mine. I'd love to hear yours. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. On the screen right now, if you'd like to continue watching the Clenbat channel, there will be 2 videos on screen for you to right now. Check them out, guys. I will see you there or in the next video. Take care.